Welcome back. In this session, we're going to talk about stories. What makes a good story? The first thing a story needs is basic information.
Hundreds and thousands of Lebanese have packed into Martyr Square here in downtown Beirut. And the people here want to see the Syrian military out of Lebanon as soon as possible.
It's got to have the who, what, why, and when.
Anti-corruption activist Anna Hazare has left prison to start a 15-day hunger strike in Delhi.
People are generally more interested in things that happen near them. And distance isn't only measured on a map. It's also measured in the audience's hearts and minds. Parents are likely to be interested in stories about children.
How did your son die?
Muslims could be attracted to a report about a mosque.
This is where the Muslim community meet.
The question is your story close enough to the audience to mean something to them? If not, how can you make it so? As you think about stories, remember what we said earlier. News is now.
Taking place in Norway, a bomb in the capital Oslo.
It's got to be tied to something that's happening, something that's actually occurring in the moment.
We call for help here in Bahrain. We cannot tolerate this. We cannot bear this. The hospital is full of casualties.
And you need to get the right person from your movement to put the story across. Get sloppy about choosing your words, and you're asking for trouble. So choose them carefully. Unlike these American politicians.
We're very honored to be back in San Francisco. We're here for a great convention. We had a great convention. San Diego, sure.
Our national interest ought to be to encourage the best and the right.
It's got to be somebody who can get the word across. That is a conspicuously careful choice.
The question is whether we're going to go forward to tomorrow or we're going to go past to the back.
Let's pause here and revisit one of our central points about news stories. You don't have a right to media attention. You have to figure out how to get journalists interested. And if you want to focus on an issue, it helps a lot to give the media a person caught up in that issue to focus on.
Among the crowd, a frail-looking 65-year-old woman demonstrates. She and the people near her are hit by tear gas and water cannon. The retired apolitical English teacher has been elevated to near mythical status on the net.
Take an issue you're interested in, then find a person embroiled in it. That's your story.
Who killed Neda Agha Sultan, and why the sensationalism that went all across the world?
She's now become a symbol and martyr for the protesters.
That is the most important, the human touch.
As you look for characters, remember that the higher profile they are, the more attention they will generally receive.
I believe that their intention is passionate and hard-working.
So what we can do is try and first and foremost raise money.
Let's review the elements in a good story. It will usually deliver a clear, positive message that supports a favorable image.
It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can.
When possible, it will contain a local angle.
A neighborhood business with strong community roots is closing shop.
And a link to what is already in the news. And always a good central character. It's important to assemble these elements as early as possible, so that if a journalist shows interest, you are instantly ready to provide what he or she wants. Being prepared also allows you to approach journalists yourself, instead of waiting for them to come to you. This is called making a pitch. Pitching a story means reaching out to journalists to persuade them that they can cover your story and that it would be in their interest to do so. Pitching a story takes skill. It's not easy. You have to do your homework. It's important to watch and listen to the news on a regular basis. Don't just consume news that you know you will agree with. What is the progressive media saying about your struggle? How about the conservative media? What's the government media saying? If you don't follow the news, why should the news follow you? Once you're consuming a wide spectrum of news, start developing a list of journalists you think might be responsive to you. Keep a list of contacts, email and office addresses, and mobile phone numbers. Now, let's take a step back. Before you contact a journalist, make sure you've taken into account the hectic nature of her schedule. Deadlines, important times by which work must be finished, often drive a journalist's day. Either way, remember that you've just entered the sales business. If at all possible, meet the journalist face to face. It will be much harder for him to refuse your request for coverage in person. Building a relationship with a journalist slowly is best.
Thanks for having me here, man.
I'm going to say,
Thank you for having me.
if you're unable to set a meeting and can't reach a journalist in some other way, you may be forced to deliver a press release. The press release is a concise statement laying out the main points you want to put across about a newsworthy event or development. It's an outdated method of pitching a story in many parts of the world and should usually be a last resort.
My advice is make the press releases interesting so that you read past the first 3 or 4 sentences.
3 million children have been saved from floods in Bangladesh by the simple construction of a dam. But if someone says to me, a group from Nigeria has gone across to Bangladesh with the aim of building a dam, blah, 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 and it will save 3 million children, or has saved 3 million children, I'm like, the story's lost. Part of a successful pitch is providing journalists with access to people, places, and information they need to cover your story. You should say how to contact your organization and who to speak to for further information. Then make sure that person is available. When the media calls you, respond immediately.
Getting back to people and just those common courtesies helped.
It's up to you to be a good source. We'll have a discussion about that when we return from a short break. Welcome back. It almost goes without saying, if you want to be a source for a journalist, you have to be willing to share your story. If you're not, you have to quickly find someone else from your group who is willing to give an interview.
There are a lot of reasonable people out here who don't have extreme views.
It's the notion of humanity.
Thinking what their frustrations are.
Like so much else we've discussed, giving an effective interview is not easy. In many ways, it's a contest between you and your interviewer to see who's in control of the pace and subject matter being covered.
Can you expect people to believe that you didn't know that that meeting was going to take place?
I can expect people to believe that you are a damned impertinence, Mr. Carlton.
Make no mistake, with practice, it's a contest you can win. Choose 3 key points you want to make, no more than 3, and don't allow yourself to be derailed from making them. Control the message.
But was the manner that you handled this appropriate?
You're back to talking about what I did. The reality is this. The reality is we wouldn't even be having the conversation about the racism that happens in the Senate or this state if it wasn't for the fact that I confronted it in an aggressive manner.
No matter what point you're trying to make, the way you answer the interviewer's questions is key. Keep your answers short.
Well, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years.
Clear.
I think that's the general direction that we want to go in.
Honest.
I think we are all umbilically tied, if you like.
On point.
It's important that people who have different voices and different views need to be heard.
Persuasive.
Virtually every week coming out with a new report, a new document, new evidence that is showing that the Palestinians in Gaza are suffering a major humanitarian crisis.
Provocative.
Unfortunately, Israel has made humanitarian assistance to Gaza a political issue.
And original.
So we are challenging the blockade itself, and in doing so trying to deliver the much needed humanitarian and reconstruction assistance that Gaza needs.
You should also look to control the imagery and symbolism in the interview.
You have the ability to choose who's speaking for you, when they're speaking for you, what are the symbols that they're using, are they surrounded by dozens of children, are they standing on the top of a mountain,
TV coming to you live,
are they in front of the parliament.
If you don't seem interested in what you're talking about, you can't expect interest from your interviewer or his audience. The best way of keeping it interesting is by learning how to seem unrehearsed.
A good interview needs to appear to be spontaneous.
We're not told that, for instance, Kabul only 7% of people in Kabul have running water. 7% of people have running water.
Spontaneity is so important to journalists that they will usually refuse to give you the questions ahead of time, though they may agree to give you a sense of what areas they want to discuss. Regardless of what the journalist asks you, you should make an effort to answer. Instead of answering the question you were asked, you may sometimes prefer to answer the questions you wish you had been asked instead.
And the truth of the matter is that Mr. Marriott was not suspended.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I did not overrule Derek Lewis.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
I took advice on what I could or could not do.
Did you threaten to overrule him?
If you feel the need to deflect undesirable questions, remember to always control your temper.
In this country.
Do you care? No, don't interrupt me. I've finished. Thank you. Bye. Where is it? Bye.
You don't come here with that tendency. Don't come here with that white tendency.
You have to keep your cool. Say everything like you're saying it for the first time and present it as a product of your unique experience. This will be more difficult the more interviews you grant on any given subject. And this is important. There may be cases in which it will serve your interests better to grant just one interview.
Tonight, a prime-time exclusive. Go inside the gates of Neverland.
The first peek ever into the training of the Special Operations Group, the elite anti-Naxal force of Odisha.
It's called an exclusive, and it's a magic word to most journalists.
An exclusive interview about the continuing fight with Israel.
It may sound distasteful to you, but all journalists want something that nobody else has. It's an important way they're measured against their colleagues. Exclusives are so important that if you give a journalist special access to a story, he or she will want to report that, and you will have made a friend.
Bienvenidos a otro segmento exclusivo de salud.
If you're offering an exclusive, let the journalist know from the beginning by using the word exclusive in your pitch. Don't want to grant access to your group? You run the risk that your story won't be covered. Not only that, you run the risk that the journalist sees the lack of access as a story.
With the Ahmadinejad regime cracking down on Western journalists, banning television cameras and even note-taking, it is a story that has been singularly difficult for news organizations to cover.
We have to smuggle our footage out of the country.
Being a source can be something very dangerous.
If they catch me with a camera, I know I will go to prison.
It can actually be a matter of life and death, so you've got to be extremely careful.
If being identified as a source puts you in danger, you can make arrangements with journalists to minimize the risk while still participating in the story. If you're worried about who's watching or listening as you speak to a journalist, suggest a safe location. If you need protection, you must always tell the journalist ahead of time what you require and for which specific parts of the interview. Asking for anonymity after you've said something is too late, and the journalist may consider herself justified in naming you as her source. Understand that hiding the identity of sources harms the credibility of a story. The best and most credible stories are always those with 2 or more fully identified sources. That's the rule. There has to be a very good reason to disguise someone's identity, but it's often done.
The trip to Baalbek was long, and we were guided there by a friend of the Hezbollah drug dealer. He didn't want to be on camera.
If you really need some degree of anonymity, don't accept phrases like off the record or on background as blanket descriptions of the agreement from the journalist.
It means something different to every ear that hears it.
You have to be specific about what protections you require.
And he said, look, if we're going to talk about this anymore, we have to go back to your hotel where we can film in private, and I want my face blurred and my voice distorted. And we said, okay, let's go.
Regardless of your circumstances, the journalist should give you a fair opportunity to get your point across. At the end of the interview, you should feel free to tell him if you have something to add or even if you want to rephrase an answer or two. Don't make these requests in a heavy-handed way. You're asking the interviewer for a courtesy. But sometimes, despite your best efforts and the most powerful pictures and words you can muster, the media still won't respond. We'll talk about what to do if that happens in the next session.